Congolese women, Congolese men, dear compatriots. 6 years ago, I officially stepped down from my responsibilities and duties as President of the Republic, serving as head of state. For the very first time in our country's history, in nearly 60 years of independence, I peacefully and willingly handed over power to a new head of state. Since then, I have deliberately imposed upon myself a strict and unwavering duty of restraint, even when I was the target, directly or through those close to me, of persistent provocations, denial of rights, humiliations, damaging accusations, and many other attacks on my dignity. First, because I am deeply convinced that time, with its steady and relentless passage, is the best and most reliable ally of truth, serving as a slow yet immensely powerful antidote to the poison of lies and denunciation, gradually revealing what is genuine and exposing falsehoods for what they truly are. But also, and above all, precisely because acting otherwise would have, in effect, played directly into the hands of those individuals who, through this hateful and divisive campaign, deliberately sought to distract our people from their now proven and undeniable inability to meet its expectations and aspirations. I have finally decided to break this long silence, to come out of my reserve and address you because the stakes are high. They are even existential, not for my political or biological family, and even less for myself, but rather for the Congolese nation and for the future of our dear and beautiful country. I decided to break the silence because, given the situation our country is going through, remaining silent would have made me answerable before the court of history for failing to assist more than 100 million compatriots in danger. I am taking this important opportunity to thoughtfully share my personal thoughts and reflections with you, and thus meaningfully contribute to the ongoing search for a viable solution to the serious crisis that our country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the cherished land of our ancestors, is currently going through because it is gravely ill. And its very survival, its continued existence, is truly at stake. Better than anyone else, you are truly and fully aware of this reality because you, more than anyone, suffer the consequences in your own flesh every single day, and you pay the price for it time and time again. My dear compatriots, given the strategic importance of our country and the role it is meant to play, I, upon the rise to power of the current head of state, entered into an agreement with him that gave birth to the coalition between our respective political forces. Regarding this particular agreement, it is important to note that many falsehoods and misconceptions have been widely spread, including, unfortunately, by the very person who should, above all others, know the truth, since he is, after all, one of the two main signatories involved in this matter. While waiting for the truth to be restored at the appropriate time, with irrefutable evidence to support it, allow me for now to state that, as far as I am concerned, the sole motivation behind concluding this agreement was the higher interest of the nation. Through this agreement on the pooling of forces, my intention was indeed to allow my successor to exercise more effective power in the management of state affairs than what the limited parliamentary representation of his political party in the new National Assembly would have rightfully granted him in order to ensure a smoother transition. Furthermore, I wanted to facilitate the smooth functioning of the institutions and to spare the nation, as well as our young democracy, from potential political crises that could have been fatal to them. This first peaceful and civilized transfer of power at the head of the country had therefore aroused even greater hope. For in January 2019, our country was in a much better state than it had been when I myself assumed the highest office in January 2001. Whereas I had found a country on the very verge of total collapse, undermined by a brutal and long dictatorship and war, without any republican institutions, completely economically bankrupt and socially torn apart. In short, a country whose uncertain future threatened the stability of the entire region. On January 24, 2019, I had indeed left my successor a much better legacy than I had inherited myself, namely, a reunified country brought together after years of division and largely pacified, meaning that peace and stability had been restored to most regions. Its territorial boundaries, without exception, matched exactly those of June 30, 1960, the date of our original independence. A nation rebuilt, brought together in reconciliation and proudly united, celebrating its diversity. A state endowed with a modern, progressive, forward-thinking constitution and institutions functioning harmoniously. A dynamic and remarkably resilient economy, now freed from the heavy burden of debt inherited from previous regimes, thanks to numerous and significant structural reforms undertaken. A national Republican army that is increasingly modern, professional, and well-trained is capable of meeting the challenge of defending the integrity of the national territory. A democracy in constant and ongoing consolidation, notably with the self-funded and independent organization of a third electoral cycle. With a heavy heart, I observe that regrettably, barely 6 years later, this beautiful and undivided legacy, bequeathed to all our people, has been completely squandered by the very one who was entrusted with its care. That our country now presents the most disheartening and distressing spectacle imaginable, and that it inspires even more profound despair among our people, as well as both pity and mockery around the world, because the recklessness of its leaders leaves absolutely no hope for recovery. This rapid deterioration of the country's overall situation is mainly due to the serious excesses of unchecked power. The new leader is indeed subjecting the country to a series of unprecedented challenges, betrayals, and deliberate violations of the Constitution, all against the backdrop of an irresistible and growing desire to concentrate all power in the hands of a single man, in blatant disregard for the pact that once cemented the cohesion and unity of our people. The first act of challenging this Republican pact, which is the true foundation of stability and national cohesion, was to deliberately violate the Constitution and the relevant laws. This occurred during the first reshuffling of the Constitutional Court by the President of the Republic. The violation of this legal text, which is the cornerstone of any rule of law state for mere political convenience, has since become a distinctive hallmark of our country's governance. In the same vein, in December 2020, an institutional coup d'etat was orchestrated following the midterm overthrow of a parliamentary majority. which had nonetheless been granted by the sovereign people as well as the government that emerged from it. This was followed by the illegal and highly controversial designation and appointment of members to the Independent National Electoral Commission, as well as the sham elections of December 2023. Organized in violation of the legal framework and relevant international standards, these elections, through an unprecedented scale of fraud, further amplified the illegitimacy of the institutions and their leaders. The final blow was dealt by the announcement of the plan to change the Constitution, a plan whose implementation would completely dismantle the national consensus of Sound City. The negative consequences of this unorthodox governance are, to say the least, staggering. The country has thus become a lawless zone. The Republic has ceased to be democratic, and the will of the head of state now serves as the supreme law, superseding the Constitution and the laws. On the other hand, when adopted as official government policy, populism and demagoguery, lies and arrogance, discrimination and stigmatization of certain segments of our people, the institutionalization of tribalism and nepotism, the deliberate pitting of national communities against one another, hate speech and injustice, as well as persistent impunity, have all the more easily destroyed national cohesion and coexistence. Given that transient and short-lived opulence and the repeated failure to keep one's word are the hallmarks of the ruling political class. This has made the country fragile and therefore vulnerable. Even more seriously, identity withdrawal, which is extremely dangerous for the building of any nation, has once again resurfaced with its old demons of intolerance and division. And to make matters even worse, this is not only tolerated and goes unpunished, but is also, above all, actively promoted and financed by those in power. In the face of this drift, Parliament has abdicated its constitutional mission as a counterbalance to power. It has thus ceased to be the temple of democracy, the ultimate place for legislative expression and the will of the primary sovereign, and has become nothing more than a rubber-stamped chamber for the will of a single person. As for the judiciary, the constitutional guarantor of public freedoms and the foundation of values that shape our identity and forge our unity, it has completely abandoned its responsibilities, openly allowing itself to be used for political purposes. It is therefore nothing more than an instrument of oppression for a dictatorship that is desperately trying to survive against the tide of history through terror and the imposition of a single way of thinking. A disreputable role that it shares with the tribal militias, as well as the police and intelligence services, which have also been diverted from their noble mission of protecting citizens and ensuring the security of the state. Economically, the situation is becoming increasingly worrying. Despite the notable increase in public revenues, which was mainly due to the full and comprehensive implementation of all the reforms that were courageously passed from 2002 to 2018, particularly the new mining, forestry, hydrocarbons, insurance, and subcontracting codes, as well as a higher level of financial aid from the Bretton Woods institutions. No significant investments have been made to equip the country with modern infrastructure, support necessary structural reforms, or stimulate growth. On the contrary, inflation and currency depreciation, once defeated, have recently returned. Corruption and the embezzlement of public funds have reached unprecedented levels. And the public debt, which we had brought under control in 2010, has once again skyrocketed, dramatically surpassing the $10 billion mark and raising legitimate concerns about the country's medium and long-term solvency, without a doubt. The social consequences are equally dramatic. Worsening unemployment, accumulation of salary arrears for state employees, a drastic decline in the population's standard of living, and a surge in urban crime, rural exodus, and famine in an increasing number of provinces. Congolese people are now truly gripped by a deep, genuine existential anxiety. Among the resigned victims of this mess, our youth stand out, even though they were involved in every stage of the democratic struggle and strongly believed in the virtues of peaceful transition. Today, with no guidance or serious prospects for the future, they feel abandoned, left at the mercy of conflict profiteers and illusion peddlers of all kinds. None of what was promised to them over the past 6 years has been fulfilled. To this disillusioned youth, as well as to our entire people, we want to offer reassurance. The failure of a compromised regime does not necessarily mean that the fate of a people is sealed forever. My dear compatriots, regarding the security situation, whether in major cities or in our countryside, it is more than worrying everywhere. This is particularly the case in North Kivu, South Kivu, Ituri, Maniema, Tanganyika, Katanga, and Mai-Ndombe, provinces that are, in particular, moreover, neighbors of Kinshasa, the country's capital and the seat of its institutions. The blood of our civilian and military compatriots, brave officers and rank-and-file soldiers, as well as deputies, prominent members of civil society or political parties, has thus been shed abundantly and needlessly. This has happened because of intolerance, cynicism, or even worse, state-sponsored terrorism, all carried out with a single aim: the abuse of power for power's sake. Such is the case, among others, of the blood of several hundred inmates from the Makala Penitentiary Re-Education Center who were savagely gunned down during the night of September 1st to 2nd, 2024, defenseless victims of an undeniable crime against humanity, which to this day remains unpunished. The same goes for the various members of the Wasalendo mystico-religious sect in Goma, the youths notably of Junafek in Lubumbashi, and the massacre of followers of the Mumbidi Church in Kilwa. This deterioration of the security situation is due to the poor governance of the country, which in these areas is now characterized by rushed military training, ethnically motivated recruitment and appointments, as well as imprisonment without trial, affecting not only many soldiers and high-ranking officers, but also law enforcement and security agents, most of whom are Swahili speakers. Moreover, the National Army, which is the shield of the nation and the essential instrument for preserving national independence and territorial integrity, has in recent times regrettably been replaced by various bands of mercenaries and armed groups. Tribal militias and foreign armed forces have not only shown their limitations, but have also plunged the country into indescribable chaos throughout the nation. The state has thus lost its monopoly on legitimate violence by outsourcing it to armed groups. Once under control, the maintenance of public order and national tranquility. And as if that weren't enough, the National Army is vilified, jeered at, and ridiculed by the authorities who never take responsibility for anything, even though they are supposed to ensure its consolidation and respectability. Having personally trained, commanded, and led them to the front lines, I know our soldiers very well. Today, unfortunately, they are being made the scapegoat for all the failures that have been recorded on the battlefield, yet they are by no means less competent, less patriotic, or less loyal than anyone else. What has changed in the meantime is the quality of leadership and the way they are cared for. At the regional level, the government has made the disastrous and unfortunate choice to turn away from the two main international instruments that originally formed the foundation of the regional peace and security architecture, which had enabled the significant regional stability that the current president found in place at the time when he first assumed office. Namely, the Pact on Security, Stability, and Development in the Great Lakes region, and the Framework Agreement for Peace, Security, and Cooperation for the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the region. Even more seriously, by turning negative forces such as the FDLR, as well as hundreds of Congolese armed groups, into auxiliaries of the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the government has paved the way for the regionalization of the conflict with inevitable consequences for the stability of the region. My fellow compatriots, while on the institutional, political, economic, and social fronts, the essential and foundational fundamentals had indeed been firmly established, and the country had been set on the launch pad, fully prepared and ready for takeoff. Yet here we are, alas, in what can only be described as record time, just 6 short years back, unfortunately, to square one. Faced with a failed, deeply divided, and rapidly disintegrating state, teetering dangerously on the very edge of total implosion, It is firmly ranked among the world's poorest countries, consistently listed as one of the most corrupt and burdened by extremely heavy and unsustainable levels of debt. This is confirmed by all the reports, whether from the United Nations Security Council or those on the Human Development Index and poverty. The crisis tearing our country apart is therefore deep and multidimensional. Its solution must necessarily be comprehensive. Any other approach has no chance of leading to lasting peace. Moreover, Congo is timeless. It does not belong to any particular political regime. The latter, by definition, is rotational and therefore temporary in a democracy. Rather, it belongs to the Congolese people in all their great diversity. What is true of Congo is also true of the vast resources of its soil and subsoil, which it abounds in, and which are essential for growth and development on an international scale. Let everyone, both within the country and around the world, take this into account and shape their projects with a perspective that prioritizes the interests of Congo and the Congolese people, rather than those of whoever happens to be leading the country at any given time. That being said, in order to save Congo, the legitimate grievances of the Congolese people against the current regime truly cannot be ignored. Instead, they must be carefully and thoroughly taken into account. The dictatorship must ultimately come to an end, and democracy, as well as sound, responsible economic and social governance, must be fully restored. Because, as history clearly shows, there can be no truly lasting security solutions without genuine political solutions. Otherwise, there will inevitably be new and potentially more severe waves of political upheaval, ongoing disturbances to peace, increased insecurity, persistent institutional instability, armed conflicts, and even civil wars. This is a prospect that, in all responsibility and with full awareness, we Congolese can no longer afford to face. It is therefore vital that the various peace-seeking initiatives, such as those taking place in Luanda, Nairobi, the East African Community, EAC, and the Southern African Development Community, SADC, as well as efforts led by the African Union, Doha, and Washington, which we wholeheartedly welcome and regard as clear and meaningful signs of compassion, empathy, and solidarity with our people, are fully aware of this crucial requirement and take it into account in all their actions and deliberations. That they grant the Congolese people, who are both masters of their own destiny and the primary victims of this crisis, the central role that is rightfully theirs, both in diagnosing the affliction affecting the country and in prescribing the remedy it needs to achieve a lasting recovery. It should be noted in this regard that the Kinshasa government, after much deliberation and consideration, has finally agreed to sit at the same table with the AFC M23 in Doha for several weeks now, even though, oddly enough, it still considers it a crime for other Congolese citizens to talk among themselves or engage in any form of dialogue or discussion. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the approach taken by the bishops of Senko and ECC, which has the merit of excluding neither any topic nor any of our compatriots from the discussion. While not perfect, this joint initiative by the churches certainly deserves support and, if necessary, contributions from our people to further enrich it. My dear compatriots, although it is not customary, it is nevertheless absolutely necessary to denounce the ongoing and deliberate falsification of our shared history by those whose perverse and manipulative game, formerly in the opposition and now in power, has consisted and still consists of systematically slandering, defaming, demonizing, and dividing in order to win and rule, shifting blame onto others to justify their own persistent underperformance, regardless of the consequences for national cohesion or the unjustly shattered or lost human lives. If any further evidence or proof were needed, we have, without a doubt, just been given it once again. Indeed, a few days ago, following a mere rumor circulating on the street or on social media about my supposed presence in Goma, where I do intend to go in the coming days, as I have already announced, the regime currently in power in Kinshasa made arbitrary decisions with a disconcerting carelessness that demonstrates the dramatic decline of democracy. Better than anyone, you know and understand that for me personally, the Congo is, without any doubt, the absolute and overriding priority, that its sovereignty as well as its territorial integrity are completely non-negotiable, that my unwavering commitment to democracy, to fostering national cohesion, to the pursuit of peace, and to ensuring stability is not merely an empty slogan or a hollow phrase, and that respect for the Constitution and the laws of the country, as well as for one's given word, are, to me, truly sacred. As a soldier, I swore to defend the homeland even to the ultimate sacrifice. Yesterday, while in power, and today, now out of power, I remain more faithful than ever before to that solemn oath. At this very moment, when our country is once again deeply divided, called by destiny and by history, I feel I have the duty and the responsibility to work tirelessly towards peace and to contribute in every possible way to the reconstruction and healing of our dying nation. It is in this spirit that I choose this moment to express my deepest sympathy to all the victims of the ongoing conflict, to offer comfort and heartfelt support, and to show my unwavering solidarity with the people of the Eastern region. You who have been abandoned by the central government, which it seems has apparently in effect chosen to punish you, among other things by disconnecting financial institutions from the national banking network, and by further restricting the movement of people and goods. These decisions, along with many others, are suffocating you and making your lives more precarious than ever. I hereby call on everyone, and especially the government, to earnestly and sincerely work to humanize and improve the living conditions of all our compatriots who reside in this part of the national territory. They have the right to life, to the education of their children, and to other conditions necessary for well-being. While earnestly awaiting the restoration of state authority throughout the entire national territory, I strongly urge those in power to protect the population. Likewise, the army, the judiciary, and other institutions that are entrusted with the important responsibility of upholding law and order in society must genuinely and wholeheartedly serve the people. They should always act in the best interests of the citizens, ensuring that their actions and decisions are guided by the needs, hopes, and aspirations of the people they are meant to protect and support. My dear compatriots, based on my experience in similar situations throughout history, patriotism and humanism have guided the process of conflict resolution, and have consistently borne significant fruit in the past, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table or through dialogue. Our country was almost split in half for several long and difficult years, but wisdom eventually and ultimately prevailed. We managed to carefully piece things back together, and the country survived, remaining in unity. Thus, after several years of reflection on the ongoing crisis, and after consulting with heads of state and former heads of state from the region, as well as political and social actors, both national and foreign, today, I have made a proposal that calls upon the entire nation to a patriotic awakening for a citizens' pact in order to pull the country out of the abyss. The truly hard work that lies ahead of us will, without a doubt, focus in particular on the following 12 important points. First, ending the dictatorship, better yet, the tyranny itself in all its forms. Second, stopping the ongoing and devastating war. Third, restoring the full and undisputed authority of the state over the entire national territory. Fourth, restoring democracy by returning to the fundamentals of a true rule of law. Fifth, re-establishing fundamental freedoms. Sixth, reconciling the Congolese people among themselves and restoring and rebuilding national cohesion. Seventh, reviving the country's development by establishing good economic governance, which involves transparent decision-making and accountability, as well as sound administrative and financial management practices that ensure efficiency and integrity, and by promoting a fair and equitable distribution of national resources among all regions and communities. Eighth, resuming sincere and ongoing dialogue and constructive communication with all neighboring countries, with a clear and determined focus on establishing lasting peace, mutual understanding, and sustainable development throughout the entire region, for the benefit of all peoples involved. Ninth, restoring the country's credibility significantly and effectively with partners at the regional, continental, as well as international levels. 10th, completely neutralizing all national and foreign armed groups and returning and repatriating the latter to their countries of origin as appropriate. 11th, putting a definitive and absolute end to the use of mercenaries in strict accordance with the African Union Convention for the Elimination of Mercenarism in Africa, adopted on July 3, 1977, as well as the United Nations Resolution of December 4, 1989, which concerns the International Convention against the recruitment, use, financing, and training of mercenaries, and furthermore, unconditionally and immediately repatriating all individuals who are already deployed and present on Congolese soil. 12th, I hereby order the immediate withdrawal of all foreign troops from the national territory. In this regard, I wholeheartedly commend the wise decision of the SADC countries to withdraw the Sami Darcy troops from our country. Given the enormity of the task as described, I make a solemn and heartfelt appeal to all Congolese, regardless of gender, ethnicity, age, social class, geographic area, or political affiliation, from all walks of life, who passionately love Congo, who are ready for any sacrifice, who fully support the Sun City Republican Pact and who are committed to respecting the Constitution of February 18th, 2006, to unite with unwavering dedication around these objectives. This is about the rebuilding of the state and the careful construction of a country that has lost its bearings. Let us all mobilize and make use of every available means at our disposal to restore and strengthen national unity, to save Congo and to preserve its independence. For the sake of our future, for Africa and the world are closely watching us. My dear compatriots, Congo is worth more than the caricature presented by its current leaders. Congo truly deserves so much better than this kind of foreign policy of constant whining and endless begging. I am therefore firmly convinced that the Congolese people are capable today, as in 1960, of overcoming the demons of division, that they are capable today, as during the 1990s, of defeating tyranny and the temptation of absolute power, that they are capable today, as in 2003, of prevailing over those who divide us and putting an end to the armed violence that pits its children against one another. To achieve this, everyone must play their part. I commit to playing mine. May God bless the Democratic Republic of the Congo. May He bless each and every one of you. Thank you.